I've been watching the Masters non-stop.
The
The
Golf Masters?
yeah,
Oh, I didn't know they were on.
yeah, we're doing a fundraiser with the GA Club, and I am updating the website with the leaderboard whenever the day is over, or whatever. So just I've been involved in it, so now I'm like watching it all day. But I love the background sound of golf. Like
Oh,
it's so soft and just like not very
ambient.
yeah, like it is, it's like one of those things you could listen to go to sleep, like
Mm.
playing in the, like it's just very nice, like the guys who talk on it have very nice voices and it's lovely. So I've had it on all day in the background and it's fantastic. So that was my day, apart from working obviously. So today we have a couple of
Today
topics
we
today
do.
on A Word With Yourself.
Hmm.
We have a couple of topics that we're going to talk about.
We have one each.
And yeah, one each actually, yeah.
Hmm.
So mine is the corporate psychopath. And what's the one you're going to be talking about?
I'm going to talk about managing up, how to do it,
Aha.
how to do it.
How to do it.
I
Okay.
mean, how to do it well,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
generally managing up. Why it's good, how
Hmm.
to do it, how to make your life easier, because
Hmm.
fundamentally managing up makes your life easier.
True. It
Hmm.
does actually. Yeah, that is such a skill that I need to hone, I think.
Maybe
So
you'll learn
maybe
today.
I will. Maybe I'll learn from it today. So yeah. So
Also, you
I
don't need to manage up because you're
well,
your own boss.
we're the bosses of our company.
Mm.
Um, Maybe I'll have to manage up for you since you're the CEO.
Yeah,
If
I
I need you to
mean,
do something, I have
in
to
name
manage up.
only.
You're my boss. That'd be so weird.
No, we're very strange.
Anyway,
Anyway, tell me about the
um,
corporate psychopath.
yeah, okay. So you know that I love talking about the corporate psychopath, and it you automatically think that it's somebody that is crazy or outwardly kind of scary or anything you would think about when you think about an actual psychopath, but it's
I'm
much,
thinking about Dr. Evil
yeah.
from the Austin Powers movie.
Yes, yes, very much like that, but in a professional setting. So these people are, charismatic, confident, and always seem to say the right thing, but like always come out of things looking great, even if things go really, really bad. And then their teams are likely unhappy. Morale is like quite low of these people as people managers, basically, or leaders in a company. So I'm sure you've worked with a couple of corporate psychopaths. I've worked with quite a few, I would say. And they just go completely unchecked in organizations. Because first of all, what links them to actual psychopaths is things like a lack of empathy or, extreme
Mm.
self-interest or manipulative behavior, but like they do it all behind that kind of mask of a professional. So it's not like, they're flipping desks or screaming at people or anything like that. They're very strategic and controlled about how they do things. And they know how to act around, say, like executives or people higher up, but they tend to, treat their peers or people who are, at a different level to them poorly, because obviously they can't get anything from them. Really, it's not in their self-interest to really, be fair to those people. So you've probably seen it. Like I've seen it a lot where I've had managers who talk to me one way but were completely different to like the VP or somebody they reported to, and it was unsettling really because you're like, why are they like acting like that? And everyone seems to love them like higher up, but then, everybody who works for them or around them is just, constantly in fear of, being spoken to in like a really like harsh way or something like that. But like, yeah, the way they talk to executives is completely different. And that's how they get ahead because, it's kind of like the halo effect as well, a little bit like that we talked about. They might have something really charismatic about them that they only show towards executives and they're like,
Mm.
wow, they're so charismatic, like wow, they must be like a really good people person, blah 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 blah. But to the people who work for them or whatever, it's completely different. So there's that kind of um disparity between the way the executives might see this person or the way the people that work for them. So
Mm.
that's kind of a little bit of a background about that, but they're not obviously just in the workplace. They've been around forever. And one of the things that I get interested in about this is that, you know, society has become more civilized now. So, back in the day, people could say anything, do anything, hundreds of years ago, rulers, might just dislike somebody and have them murdered or something like that, right? But we've become so um socially aware, and there's laws and things like that have just kind of put these guardrails around things that we can do. So people who have like psychopathic tendencies have had to really you know go under the radar and kind of bring those personality traits out in some other ways. So that's why you see them in the corporate workplace, because things like, lack of empathy or extreme confidence, things like that really get things done, even if it's like something that doesn't help people or build morale or anything like that. It's kind of like a results type thing that people or senior people tend to think is like a really good way of working, or wow, they're so successful, they're achieving things, like they must be great. So it's just that kind of the psychopathic tendencies that they have, but they're just in a much more professional way. And they tend to think nobody can really tell they're doing it, right? They're smarter than everybody else. So we see them a lot. I don't know. Have you ever seen someone that you think might be considered a corporate psychopath?
Sure, definitely. When you were saying it there, I was thinking about, is there ever a good place for them? And the reason I was thinking this, I was because I was like, well, if some of the definition is just like, being very like no empathy, right? Being very straightforward. If you were a very intelligent sociopath or psychopath, I guess, in the corporate world, that it actually makes sense from like a business perspective, from a profitability perspective, to treat your people very well. So if you were smart enough, even as a corporate psychopath, you would still treat people well because it's the best thing to do for the company, right? Like it's the best thing to do. And so I'm thinking to myself, if you have a lot of dumb corporate psychopaths, or very like just completely self-centered psychopaths, because I think you can have people who struggle with empathy, right? Because empathy is a learned skill. Struggle with empathy, but recognize where it's needed and will try, right? Versus the people who might struggle with empathy and decide they don't care. Like, you know what I mean? Like they don't see a need for it. They don't see why they should. And so they don't bother. So I think you could have, and again, completely making this up based on what you told me, doesn't mean theorizing. Could be way off the mark. Like the dumb corporate psychopath who doesn't recognize that all of these other things you do need to do because it's better for the company, and if you're not doing it, you're just not that smart. Second, the selfish corporate psychopath, so that they're literally only out for themselves, even if the world burns around them.
Exactly. Yeah.
Or maybe the corporate psychopath that inevitably turns out to be a force for good because they're unemotional, but they recognize that the stuff that empathy would normally lead people to, like treating your people well, treating your employees well, treating people fairly, they do that kind of happens just in a different way because they are smart enough and they recognize that that's actually the best thing overall for everything to work well. Although I will say I'm not sure I've come across one of those. I just think that maybe they could exist.
See, those people would probably be really good leaders because they
Right.
operate in the really kind of way that a psychopath would, but they're aware of what they're doing. So they're kind of filtering themselves based on, how things will be better if they do something this way. Whereas, the corporate psychopath that I'm talking about is kind of a mixture of things, like a lack of empathy, self-centered, overconfident, that type of thing, where they really are very focused on themselves and not the bigger picture. So as long as they're getting results, like whatever it is, they don't care about anybody else, even if they probably have heard that it's better to do it a certain way. If things happen, say, where they did something that's their fault, like they're not going to say it's my fault. They're going to try, to blame it somehow on somebody else or position it in a different way. So I would say there's definitely people out there who have psychopathic tendencies, but then can also have the self-awareness to realize that they have that. So that's where the difference comes in, but it's interesting.
Yeah, because I mean, to your point, if you end up being a malevolent force, not to put too harsh of a word on it, I get there are some folks out there that as long as they think they can preserve their reputation, they would still burn a company to the ground.
Oh yeah.
If they think they could still come out of it looking good or whatever, whereas you would hope there's more out there, and maybe there is. Maybe we think we haven't seen them, but that's because they're very good at their jobs.
Yeah.
That are end up being a force for good,
Hmm. Even
even
with
with
the
those. Yeah.
yeah, they've recognized their highly negative traits, and then are also trying to use them for good, I guess.
Mm,
But it all might still be a self-centered thing. They're just playing everybody,
sure.
and
Yeah.
everybody's playing some kind of in a way, I'm sure.
Sure. Yeah.
So yeah, it's very interesting, and it is also hard to pinpoint. So that's one of
Mm,
the things is like, we've probably seen it in work, but nothing's ever really done about it because it's not something that's really a tangible thing. It's more like how people feel, how they perceive things, so on and so on. And, if somebody is achieving results, management are likely not going to want to kind of bring out a magnifying glass and look into how they're doing it. Like, unless there's some like really, really bad behavior or something, or,
it's true.
say 10 people quit at once. You often see people kind of quitting in drips and drabs. Like, one
Mm,
person will leave, they'll hire somebody else, and another person will leave because it's hard to just leave a job and get another job. So it takes
mm,
time. So people, could be trying to get another one but aren't able to, and so on and so on. And then they can just brush that off. Oh, they got a better opportunity and they wanted to do a different kind of role or something like that. There's all these things around it. And it's also really awkward for like HR or anybody like that to kind of address this type of behavior because it's like uncomfortable. It's awkward to kind of say to people like, hey, I think you're a psychopath. Like, I don't think anyone's ever going to say that to anybody, but
I
I
don't know.
wish I wish you
I
could.
have sat in some exit interviews.
Yeah. Where people have said these people are psychopaths. And even at that, like you don't take that as literal. Like, I'm sure maybe you probably would have taken it as very serious, but a lot of people be like, oh, it's just a disgruntled employee, blah, 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 blah,
Oh
blah.
yeah.
And so yeah, it's very hard to address again because of the results thing. So if you're working in the private
Mm,
sector, even more so because it's just like, wow, we're making great profit, blah, blah, blah. Okay, we're losing a few people, but like look at the profit. They're not seeing the long-term effects of like brain drain and knowledge drain and all that type of thing and poor culture, morale, blah, 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 because they can't see
certainly.
that as physically as a profit,
Yeah.
or revenue coming in. So that is why things like culture audits,
Mm,
like a third party person coming in, and you really have to have management buy-in or senior leadership who understands this or has noticed kind of a pattern of things happening, and that really wants to deep dive into the culture of a company to see if these people exist, because they do, or fear of
mm,
retribution or anything like that, or they don't want to say something about their boss because maybe the senior manager likes them and just makes
mm-hmm.
them, they think it'll give them a bad perception. So doing things like, yeah, a third party culture audit, who's somebody who is not part of the company, has no skin in the game, anything like that, who just kind of learns from employees what it's like, and can ensure a sense of anonymity as well, where people aren't getting like in trouble or anything like that for what they say. But yeah, there are ways to deal with it, but it's just it's a difficult one to do because you want to have buy-in from people as well. So
Yeah.
yeah, I feel like I talked a lot there.
Oh, it was good. No, it was
Just
great. Yeah.
just a running non-stop, didn't breathe. Oh
Yeah, I can
Lord.
see because when we talk about performance management and being
Hmm.
conscious that not just people's that to look as a broader kind of look at assessing people's performance that includes their
Hmm.
impact on the kind
Yeah.
of wider company culture, I think is good.
Yeah.
And choosing people, there might be people that are more strong in some areas than others, and that kind of works better if someone is maybe a bit brash or a bit of an
Hmm.
asshole just
Yeah.
because they are. It's easier to spot, but like it would be
Yeah.
much harder with someone who's actively trying to hide it, right? And
Exactly.
potentially knows and is experienced in manipulating situations to
Hmm.
try and come out on top.
Yeah, it can be
Tricky
very
one.
subtle.
Yeah,
Can be
very
very
tricky one.
subtle. Yeah. And I guess this leads into managing up. If you're you report to a corporate
What a
psychopath.
segue.
I didn't even plan that. I was just thinking, how the hell, if you are reporting to what we would call a corporate psychopath, how do you do
Well,
it?
I'm going to say something that is contrary to the rest of this. If
Hmm.
you to the kind of more malevolent ones that you're
Yeah,
talking about, I think my advice would be to look for another
leave.
job. Yeah, because like you could fight
Not
the
going to
good
get better.
fight, of course, if you have the energy and the time. Honestly, more power to you. Like someone should, right?
Hmm.
But not everybody has that, and it might be
No.
better to look for a different position. What I would say in that situation is the CYA of your work becomes incredibly important, which is cover your ass.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I was nodding away as if I did.
Here, yes, cover your ass, which just basically means document everything that you do so that you have, facts on your side if anything was to blow back on you, or if credit is taken that was due to you, all of those kind of things, that you kind of have everything.
Yeah.
So covering your ass is very important in a situation like that, but very damaging from a, kind of toxicity, like, and honestly, mental health at work and place it to do it over a sustained period of time, especially if you don't have a lot of support, right? If you didn't have like a bigger team that you were all in it together, or somebody within the company that was able to see what was going on and could kind of commiserate with you. If you don't have that kind of support system, it can be very difficult to deal with it, especially if they're very present. Managing up for regular managers, on the other hand,
who aren't
out to get you.
It's not just managers, by the way, who are psychopaths. Like, there could be anyone, like your peers, anything like that. But generally, they tend to be very successful, so that's why they're higher up and so on. So
they do.
Anyway, normal managers.
Normal managers. So managing up. So a lot of people may have heard of this. Most people have heard of this. It's kind of one of those phrases that gets tossed around, like, oh, you like, sure, you have to do, but you also need to know how to manage up, right? And like, that's great. And it's like, okay, but but what do you mean?
But how?
What do you mean?
Like, tell my boss
do I
they're
do this?
Stupid?
And basically what it means, if you consider, an organization to be kind of like a living organism, right? Every piece is depending on another piece. Your manager is dependent on, or any manager is dependent on, a team of people to do their job too, right? Like, it all fits in with itself. And what you want to do, what most good managers will want to do, is to spend as little time as possible managing you.
Yeah.
And the best way to do that, as the person reporting into that, is to manage up as best as possible. And if you're a manager, it's about teaching your employees how to manage up. Don't expect them to just be able to know how to do this. It's a skill, it needs to be learned just like anything else. So the best way to do this is, in the beginning of your relationship with your manager, is to sit down and talk to them about what, of course, your goals are, but also what their goals are, right? And as much as they're willing to share with you, of course, there might be some, other stuff that you should know, but for the most part, what their goals are and what they're looking out for, what's important to them, in either the long term, like as a general sense, or in the near term, or like within that week, whatever that looks like. And you have some short, medium, long term kind of goals and priorities. And then you need to look at your kind of body of work that your manager is overseeing, and look at how you want to start communicating your progress on that in a way that reduces the amount of time that both your manager and you, to a point, but mainly your manager in this case. This is an a semi-altruistic exercise to make your life easier, even though it gives you more work. Yeah. So it is still, on balance, less work than if your manager needs to micromanage you, or even wants to micromanage you, because it also tries to head off those people too. The whole trick of it is to get a very clear understanding about what their goals and priorities are, and look at how you categorize your work that they're ultimately overseeing into those priorities and goals, and then determine, and you can do this in conversation if you want, or just try and figure it out yourself if they're not really open to the conversation. Figure out like the frequency and the detail within which you are going to report on your work to them within those priorities and goals. So it's little things like, say for you as a person working for them, one of the things that takes up the most of your time is, I don't know, creating shift schedules, right? Say you're a supervisor. Because creating shift schedules can be very complicated in shift work, right? And so creating and managing shift schedules could be like a big chunk of your job, and also something that might give you a lot of stress, and it feels like you're spending a lot of time on. But from your manager's perspective, all they want to know is, from their perspective, that might be so low on their priority list. And so a lot of people, what they mistakenly do is they see what takes them the most time and is the highest kind of like priority of work for them to do. And they report on it exactly the same to their boss, as if their boss should care about that stuff, or does care about that stuff in the same way. And in reality, that's never true. And that's not a bad thing. That's just like, the reason you exist is so that you can care about that stuff a lot. Right? that's your job.
Yeah.
That's why you're there, right? And so it's not your boss's job to care about it a lot. It's your boss's job to make sure you're doing your job. So you have to understand how your priorities and goals or your work fits in within their priorities and goals.
Yeah.
And so in that instance, your boss as a footnote to your updates could be, had 100% availability of people, all good, right? Shifts schedules are scheduled out and agreed upon for the next 3 months. All cover has been arranged. Here's the amount of overtime we're forecasting, yada, yada, yada. Like, just like almost like a footnote. They don't probably want that at the top of their list because it's just really not that important.
Yeah. Yeah. They just want to know, is it done and is it okay? And
yeah,
you need my help anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So like the most things like the in my experience managing up is the things that your boss will be most interested in is there any way that you're not able to do your job right now that I can help you with? Right. And within that, in order of priority as to what is actually important. So so managing up is really about, and it doesn't happen immediately. You have to start at the beginning of the relationship with a conversation with your manager, figure out what their goals are. It's honestly helpful to have like a running document or dashboard or something that you would make. And the reason I came to this a lot was because my background originally was in project management, and I actually found that a project management style dashboard ended up being universally applicable for any relationship, professional relationship that I was in, whether it's something that I gave to my people to use to report to me or that I used to report up. Because if you can get a one pager that lists all the stuff that you're working on and like a status of how it's going, even if it's something that's just you do every day, it's so easy. It's so easy. And then they can immediately receive that information. You are also giving them that information before they have to ask you about it. And this is the second part of it, is that what you don't want is your manager coming to you being like, hey, what's going on with this? Where are we with this? Why hasn't this happened yet? Like all of these things. Now, of course, they're going to sometimes pop up and ask the question anyway. But if you've given them, say, a weekly update, even without having a meeting, just a weekly update, say you have that little one page like dashboard and you send that to them weekly, the odds of them picking up the phone to you is just goes down dramatically.
Great.
Dramatically goes down, because they'll be like, oh, I'll just check what they sent me yesterday or 2 days ago or 3 days, like literally within the last week. I'll just set and see what it is. And if they needed something that's like very urgent, up to date, maybe they'll phone you then, but that rate of calls goes down dramatically. And then not only that, what comes from it then is it's one of the best ways you can build trust equity with your boss. If you can build trust equity with your boss, you are more likely to get promoted. You are more likely to be considered to be a reliable worker. Like all of these things that are important in a workplace, managing up is so important to do that. And that's all before you start talking about politics, because we would all like to say we don't get involved in office politics, but office politics sometimes can mean making sure that the work you're doing is reported effectively, reported up, is visible, right? Because another thing that's important here in terms of managing up is there's probably a ton of stuff that fills your day that isn't necessarily on your boss's radar. So they might be like, I've heard loads of people being like, oh well, they just do this thing, like I don't think they do anything else. Like what else do they do? And then you go talk to the person like, oh, but I do this and this, and it's like, oh, I never knew that. And so again, that managing up, that reporting up on your workload, you should include stuff that takes up time, so that they're aware of like the full breadth of work that you're actually doing. Because I can tell you, as someone, once you manage more than 4 people, you can't hold in your head the absolute detailed list of everything that each person is working on at any given time and that they're responsible for. And honestly, you don't need to if it can be written down somewhere. And once you do more than that, once you start managing, you have like 10 plus people, then it's impossible. And so the managing up portion of it becomes very important. If you can be the person in your boss's life that gives regular updates so they don't have to come looking for them, accurate updates matched to their goals and priorities, so that they are able to, really kind of assess that information quickly and apply it to probably their version of managing up, right? Or the work they have to do. And you can include all like the breadth of your entire kind of portfolio of work so that they have a good understanding of your workload and what you're doing and what you're responsible for. They will love you. Like they will love you
Yeah.
for the most part, right?
Yeah.
It was very, it
Yeah.
really is just so important. And sometimes that's all office politics has to be,
Oh
is
yeah.
managing up effectively, right? And
Yeah.
doing the best that you can do there.
Making it
Yeah.
easier for yourself in the
Yeah.
long run again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I think I got to a point with some one-on-ones with folks where, that little dashboard would have been done and sent. We'd have our one-on-one, and the one-on-one could be 15 minutes because once a week. So really very little time. Because I've already seen that dashboard. I can see everything's fine. And the
Yeah.
15 minutes is like, how are you doing? Like, are you okay? Is your workload okay? Like,
Yeah.
could you take on more work? Are you overworked? Like,
Yeah.
and it's about looking at like any barriers to work or any opportunities for new stuff that they might want to get into, or if they're having issues themselves, in terms of like interpersonal or anything like that. So you can talk about the stuff that needs to be talked about, not just, so
Yeah,
how's this project going?
everything.
And what's that project doing? And how's that project? Like, it's unnecessary, right?
You can
So
use
it's
your time
also an
better.
efficiency thing. So surprise, surprise, it's in my
Yeah.
tool belt.
Well, you think the magic tool belt.
I know the magic tool belt. So yeah, it's one of those things that it is more work to do. I think it's a valuable investment. I think that investing in it early and often actually turns into less work eventually. Like it's one of those things that ends up being less work down the line. It makes your life easier. It makes your boss's life easier. Your boss will love you. You're more likely to be considered for so many things. You're seen as very communicative, very responsible, and you're seen as very responsive, even though you're not, that's not actually what you're doing technically. Like you're being proactive about giving information. And that can be seen as very responsive. So managing up.
Wow, like I'm going to actually use a lot of that. I think going forward, because as you said, it's a little bit of work, but then it just creates this clarity and transparency where nothing's a surprise, really. Obviously there will be surprises here and there, but like your boss knows what you're doing, what they're looking for. You touch base once a week or whatever, and they can trust that you can do your job and that you're going to give them regular updates so they can do their own job. And yeah, it just I don't see any downsides to it.
No. And like, maybe every few months you say like, is this still your priority? Like, does this still work for you? Would you want to see more of something, less of something?
And it shows you're interested and that you're looking to, improve or just kind of navigate different things that are happening and so on. So yeah, it does make you look very keen.
Honestly, yeah, which is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
It's because if you have a boss as well that is willing to talk more about what their goals are and their priorities are in their work, which might take some time for them to trust you to do that, of course.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
It means that then if you are looking to progress and you can be like, I'd love to get involved in that project that's going on, or I could help you out with that if you need a hand, or which is ultimately how people get promoted.
Yeah. And as a byproduct of that, keeping all the details and format or updating it every week and stuff, it keeps you on track and makes it less likely that you're going to forget something, or just something will just go out of your head and you forget to respond or update it or something like that too. So it's more likely that you're going to like be successful in what you're doing too, because you're keeping track of what you're doing, deadlines, etc., and your boss is aware of it too. So it's like there's nothing kind of hidden really.
Yeah, which is really helpful. And it can also help weed out work. So I know like a few times I've been going and like I've looked at someone, I'm like, oh, are we still doing that? Right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it might be something not on your radar anymore, but they don't know.
Yeah, I'd be like, what, actually that's not that important anymore. If you think it's too much, like, or this report you've been sending every week, actually, do you know what, we don't need that anymore, we do this other thing, or like, so it's good for keeping your work like constantly prioritized. Which helps. I mean, if you're someone who's inclined towards like work anxiety as well, it's very helpful, because then you don't really have to overthink like the silence, So like, the absence of feedback sometimes can be filled with imagination. And if you're prone to work anxiety, that's not good for you, because it's prone to negative scenarios that you imagine in that gap of feedback.
Yeah.
And that's right, again, very human response. But if you're kind of doing this every week, like you don't have that gap, you don't have that feedback gap, because you're kind of actively getting it and seeking it out, and that you're working to what you're meant to be working to, you're working to your boss's priority. And if somebody else is coming and asking you to do other stuff, either of course you can go to your boss and be like, should I be doing this? Or you can say, no, like I'm Like, I'm stacked. I'm good with what it is, and you can
Mm-hmm.
go to my boss if you want them to fit it into
Mm-hmm.
my workload, or you bring it up with your boss the next time you see them, whatever that is. But it gives you a better sense of like what your portfolio looks like.
Yeah.
Mm.
I really like, yeah, I'm definitely going to do that because I am definitely the type of person who is just has stuff everywhere, like notes written everywhere. Nothing is like all together in one place. But like since the start of my career, I've been trying to make a notebook work, and
Mm.
it's very hard. So yeah, I have to be more conscious of, listing all the things I'm doing and being more open with sharing that and asking for, like priorities for like your boss, etc. So I've learned a lot today.
Huh.
Yeah.
Great. I'm glad.
Thanks very much. That was very, very informative. That's great. Did you have any red flags or roses for the week? Because I totally forgot to think of one.
I have a red flag for the week.
Okay.
If okay, here's my red flag for
Think
the
about how
week.
you want
Yeah, I'm
to
thinking about
phrase it.
how I want to phrase it. Um, my red flag of the week: if something looks too simple and neat,
Mm-hmm.
when it shouldn't, right? Or in general terms, it would never be that simple and
Mm-hmm.
neat. It's probably not that simple and neat, and you need to look into it more.
Yeah. Usually things are too good to be true.
Too good to be true.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Then,
Mm-hmm.
do a little digging.
Err on the side of
And yeah.
caution in that
Yeah.
sense. Mm-hmm.
Somebody
Mm-hmm.
I used to work with had a great phrase. I don't know if it was theirs or if they had also learned it throughout their career, which was the notion of trust, then verify. Or trust and verify, which is basically this idea of I trust you, but I am going to verify it.
Yeah.
Like, yeah,
Yeah.
which I think is perfectly, honestly, normal in a
Mm-hmm.
professional environment,
Well,
which is like
yeah.
I trust your work, but of course I'm going to like double check it and make sure,
Well, of
obviously.
course, if they have to present it or something and it'll fall
Yeah,
back on them, it's wrong. Yeah, it's definitely good to get the full explanation so you understand where like numbers are coming from, things like that, right? So you're not caught out when somebody says, "Huh, that
yeah,
doesn't look right," and then you're like, "Well, so and so
yeah,
told me so,
yeah,
and I
yeah.
believe them."
So yeah, I had to do a little digging this week for some people,
Yeah.
and digging was required,
Ah,
and
you're wrecked from all the digging.
wrecked from it. Wrecked from it.
Big hole out in the garden.
Yes, that was my red flag this week for sure. Too simple, too neat. Something's
Yeah,
not right. Something's not right.
flag is waving.
Waving.
Yeah. Well, that's a good one. I can't believe I've actually running out of them, which is terrible.
I can't believe it either, honestly.
Yeah, I know.
What about a good one?
Oh God. Well, a really good one actually that I've never experienced before in a meeting was that the head person, we're kind of having a meeting about, work and workload and things like that, and they basically said, look, we're not fighting fires. Like this is the leader who said this or whatever. It's usually someone who's like, oh God, we're not fighting a fire or whatever. Like Jesus, or we're not
Yeah.
doing brain surgery. Like why are people so obsessed like with this or whatever? And like literally said like, look, we get our work done, like we do a good job, but like there's no need to like think that there's a fire brigade like pulling up outside, there's a fire happening, we need to get this out or whatever it is. So it was really nice to hear that from like a senior person who took
Yeah.
that view, because it kind of just made everyone go, huh, okay, we can kind of relax a little bit, not be as high strung. So I was like, wow, never heard that.
That's great.
Mm,
Honestly, that's great. Because if
hmm
everything's a fire, nothing's a fire.
Exactly. And I really wanted to say that because I
No,
know
you
we,
did.
we always say it. And I was
We
like,
always do.
how could I get that in? I didn't though. I was raging.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a good one. So that made me feel like nice and warm inside.
Oh, that is nice. That is nice. And honestly, sign of a good leader.
Yeah, really is. Yeah, to just be like aware and just be like, look, we'll get our jobs done. Like it doesn't matter if we're stressed to the nines, like,
Yeah.
as long as it's like a good working environment, people get their stuff done. That's what every environment should be like, I think. But, who are we to say?
Who are we?
Who are we? Who is she? Nobody will get
Oh.
that reference. But anyway, so that was it. We'll be back again next week.
Yeah, we will.
For more interesting conversation.
Yeah. Yep. So,
Fantastic.
have a word with yourself.
Yeah. If you think you might be a psychopath, have a word with
Mm.
yourself and cop on.
If your boss is giving you grief, make sure you're managing up effectively first. Then complain about your boss afterwards if you are.
Yeah, take all the notes, all the receipts, then complain.
Can't complain.
And if
Yeah.
they're really, really psycho, get another job. Just start
Yes,
putting your CV
just
out there.
start. Yeah.
Just, yeah, it takes a long time. It's a pain in the arse, but you know, usually they don't get any better from experience,
Mhm.
right? So it's just like, get out of there.
You don't have to fight every fight.
No, you know what? Whatever makes life easier for you. Just,
Mhm.
yeah. Anyway,
Yep.
right.
Anyway,
On that note,
bye.
bye.